Hello everyone. Now I want to look at the game from round 6 of the Norway chess tournament with the white pieces GM Fabiano Caruana, with the black pieces GM and former world champion Viswanathan Anand. This was a good game here. Hold tight. Game started off c4 from Caruana. Now just remember that in round 4, which was 2 rounds ago, Anand had lost to Anish Giri in the English. And so here's Caruana testing Anand's resolve. This is more of a psychological move right here. Anand had just faced defeat, and Caruana is presenting him with the same um, opening again, perhaps hoping to see if some psychological effect results here on Anand. E5. So Anand plays the same thing he played against Giri. Knight C3. So they're just following the footsteps of the other game. Now, I explained the ideas behind this move. Is real simple, though it's akin to the Nimzo Indian idea. The difference is the knight is not pinned here, so a knight can just jump to d5. But the idea was basically to remove this knight from the control over the e4 square. All right, and I'm not going to go into great detail with it because I went into more detail in my in the round of 4 explanation of Anand, excuse me, of Giri versus Anand. But in that game, knight d5 was played by Anish Giri, and then bishop c5, knight f3, and here Anand plays the move c6. This is in the present game, the Caruana game. Now in the Giri game, Anand had played the move knight f6. Giri played the move b4, and which I thought was an excellent move. Then after the moves knight takes d5. Again, for further analysis on that game, just go into my playlist and check out the game Giri versus Anand for the analysis there. But after knight takes d5, b takes e5, knight f6. Now we have knight f3 by transposition. Okay. And eventually bishop b2 was played. We had d6. C takes, and we had this position. Again, some of the move order is switched, but I'm getting to the same position. And we wound up, yes, castle, and bishop e2, and we wound up in this position here, where Giri held the 2 bishops. He got rid of his double pawn there, and this pawn was backwards, and he had nice control over the d5 square. Difficult for black to push here because of the pressure on the e pawn. And Giri went on to win a nice game where he basically just pushed Anand back on the king side here. These aren't the exact move. This isn't the exact move order, but basically Giri just increased his space advantage, eventually opened up the position for the 2 bishops, and Anand really didn't have a chance here. He kind of got crushed that game. So he went back to the drawing board. Caruana attempted to play the same system against him, and he went back to the drawing board. So he played c6, Knight returns, c3, and now d6. e3, bishop b4. And notice this is a constant theme that you'll see with this variation, is the bishop really wants to take this knight off, because black really wants to control this square. d4, knight d7, queen c2, knight g f6, a3, and we see our Nimzo-Indian themes here, giving up this bishop for the knight. Caruana is a classical player, and he reminds me of Kramnik a lot. He doesn't like to see his pawn structure, destroyed, and he plays this variation akin to the queen c2 variation of the Nimzo-Indian, where he captures the on c3 with the queen in order to keep his pawns intact. So castle, bishop e2, rook e8, b4. So the plans of both sides are pretty defined here. Again, black has control over the e4 square, and we'll have chances of attacking attacking white on the queen side. One of the downsides of moving the queen around early is the loss of time. And in the Nimzo-Indian positions, black often will use this loss of time to attack the white king position. So even though white is able to keep a pristine looking position, his loss of time gives black many opportunities to gain initiative in the position. As you can see right here, even moves like knight e4 already on the table, gaining tempo against the queen. All right. Now, again, if white can get to, out of this situation, catch up in development, and get to, a nice middle game and end game, he has everything in his favor. He has two bishops. He has a nice position, advanced on the queen side, and he should be able, to have a nice, comfortable position. But that's if. So black has dynamic opportunities here, and this position is similar to the Nimzo-Indian. So the play is going to be the same. So there's e4. Okay, this is about activity. So black has to strike now while the iron is hot. Knight d2, d5. Notice the pawn chain. If you're familiar with the pawn chains, usually, you want to attack in the direction that your pawns, are facing, that your lead pawn is facing. So as you can see, the e pawn, this chain is kind of pointing toward the king side. This is where you have the most space, and you usually want to conduct the attack there. And we can see we see white having more space on the queen side and conducting his attack there. We can see also that it will be quite dangerous for white to castle over here on the king side, but it looks dangerous to castle on the queen side because of the pawns being pushed forward. So this already has the makings of a very dynamic game, and psychologically I think this falls in Anand's favor, because Anand likes these dynamic aggressive positions, where Caruana to me is more of a solid player and likes things to be more controlled at the board. a4, d takes c4. Alright, knight takes c4, knight b6, knight a5, knight d5. Notice gaining tempo against the queen. So you can see how white is not really coordinated and developed properly. All right, this gives Anand right the incentive to open up the position and start attacking, and this is what he does so well. This is right up his alley, this type of game. It's queen d2, queen c7, right? See how difficult it is for black, excuse me, for white to even consider castling on the queen side. All right? h3, it's a move you do not want to really have to make. All right? There's a lot of important pieces that have to get into the game, and he's playing h3 to keep pieces off of g4. Rook e6. Again, more attacking themes. Notice this pawn is weak. Bishop a3. Where else to put the bishop? This pawn blocks the bishop, so eventually white is hoping to play b5 and get this guy into the action, and then at the same time he can get his rook into the game. So his position is real awkward looking right now. But if he can, untangle, hey, then he'll be all right. And that's what Caruana is trying to do right now. a6. All right. So what a6 does is kind of put more of the brakes on b5. If b5, more things get opened up for white. All right. Excuse me, for black. So b5 will be a tactical error here after a takes b5. And let's just take, for example, a takes b5. Then the queen would just capture the knight here, because now that the rook is open up, we have a double attack here. So Anand puts the brakes on this move right here. Knight b3, Caruana, of course, looking, here, this square. Knight e8. This knight moving from f6, right, moves the clears the path for this rook to come over here and attack. And there you have it. Right, so now black is not just simply losing the tempo after knight e6, but he moves with a threat of his own. g3, again, another move that white doesn't really want to make. Okay, and there's another jewel for you to put in your mind, is that if you find yourself in a position where you have to move, right, that's a sign of weakness. You don't want to be in positions where you have to make moves, even if your opponent doesn't have like a direct winning continuation. If you're in a position where you're kind of making moves that you don't want to make, but you need, it's like you have to make them for defensive purposes, that's like all the telltale signs of something going seriously wrong with the position. The more options you have, that's a sign of a good position. But when you start having to make moves like g3 and h3, and you can't get your rooks into the game, or your pieces aren't being developed, but you have to make these type of moves, that's a a telltale sign of a bad position. Okay, knight d6 from Anand. Again, notice how crucial the e4 square has been in cramping the white position and just creating this awkwardness. Right, this pawn is very, very annoying. a5, fixing the weakness here on the a6 pawn. So we can see that white is pretty much giving up the idea of playing b5. Okay, so instead he fixes black's weakness here on b6. Bishop f5. Queen to c2. Rook e8. Notice this overprotection of the e4 square. 3 pieces. Because this square is so important that Anand invests, right, the the 3 pieces in its protection. Not only is the pawn overprotected, but it also discourages moves like f3, because once the exchange happens, then this pawn on e3, right, will be totally vulnerable. Another thing I want to mention about overprotection is that, and this comes from Nimzovich, is that when you overprotect, right, which means you have more than what's needed protecting a point or a pawn, right, you actually free up all your pieces. So for example, in this position, you have the bishop, the black bishop on f5, and the knight on d6 protecting the e4 point. That's 2 pieces. And you have 2 pieces attacking. You have the knight on c5 attacking and the queen on c2 attacking. So it's kind of like a standstill. So, you know, theoretically, if you were to move the bishop away, then white could capture the pawn. If you move the knight away, again, white can capture the pawn. So when you have 2 defenders and 2 attackers, well, the defenders are tied down to the defense, right? And you don't want your pieces tied up like that. However, when you add the 3rd piece to the defense, now all of the pieces are free. Okay? Why do I say that? Because once you have 3 defenders, I can move the bishop away. The pawn is still defended, right, by 2 pieces. I can move the knight now. Pawn is still defended by 2 pieces. I can even move the rook. The pawn is still defended by 2 pieces. That is the theory of overprotection, right? That by putting more than what is required, you actually free up all of your pieces now. All right, let's move on. Rook e8. I hope you got that one. So finally, Caruana has to put his king somewhere. He connects his rooks, and he's on this other side of the board now, which is very dangerous because he's already committed to, you know, pushing his pawns on the queen side, right, and trying to break through on the queen side. So he gave up on that idea. So his majority, his queen side expansion ideas were crippled, and so he decided to fix the pawns with a5, and now it's just a matter of time because this pawn structure on the queen side is too weak, and Anand has this break at any time that he needs it. So he can open up the C file. All right. But what else was Caruana to do? So we can say right here that black is definitely better. He's been better, but this is definitely a move of desperation. Again, this is like one of those mandatory moves. What else can I do? Well, I'll just castle. Queen c8, just attacking something. g4, very provocative move. So he provokes the pawn to come forward. Now Anand's next few moves are quite instructive. Bishop drops back to d7. The king removes itself from the c file. And now f5. Notice that. What did Anand do? First, he provoked the pawn to move up. Okay? So it creates more weakness, right, around this pawn. He drops the bishop back. And now he attacks. Right? So now white is faced with the dilemma here. Either he, captures here, which allows white's pieces to get in, black's pieces to get in, activates this rook on the g file, right? Or he keeps the position closed, okay? But that gives black an easier time of it, because then white cannot attack on the queen side, on the king side rather. So Caruana decides to take the risk, and he opens up the g file, because really that's his only chance. He can't afford to keep it closed. And of course Anand knew this also. Rook f6, rook g1. So now Caruana occupies the g file. So counterplay in a worse position is better than no play at all. Bishop takes f5, h4. Rooks double up on open files where they belong. Rook h2, again, a move that, you know, is like mandatory, right? Indicative of a worse position. Nan plays king h8. Queen to d2. And now Anand plays rook g6, right? Offering a trade, this trade of rooks here. Now maybe he could have played a move like bishop e6, just trying to attack this pawn, but it's defended easily enough after, say, queen e1. So I can't really blame him for doing this move. It's not a bad move in itself. This is an interesting move. I guess he didn't want to lose the tempo after bishop takes g6, h5. But after bishop f5, h6, then just close up the position here with g6. I like that a little better than the game continuation, which looks exotic, but I don't know how good it is. But this idea, wind up working for him. So after h5, Anand just kept the position closed anyway, which I felt he could have did the other way instead of doubling up these pawns. So g5, h6, and g6. And as you can see, the pawns are doubled, but the position is still closed. So I guess it's a matter if, a matter of this position, right, where the position's still closed, but your pawns are, more in check, or what actually happened in the game. The position's still closed, but you have these doubled pawns. Alright, so bishop b2, of course, you always got to be on point for any type of opposition to your important pieces. Bishop g4. So bishop f1. King h7. So Anand knows what time it is. It gets off the path of the bishop. So what? The pawn is there right now. Tactics ensue. Next thing you know, this pawn is gone, and your king is in trouble. So it's always good to get out of situations like that. When a rook is in opposition to your king, a queen, it's just a good, usually a good move to do. King a1. Bishop f3, and black is just dominating the position, just taking more space. Rook h3, again, a move that doesn't really do anything. And now we kind of see the idea Anand had when he allowed his pawns to be doubled, right? Instead of having a useless pawn here on h7, let's go back a little bit. I think it's important, because at first I kind of overlooked the idea. Again, we were talking about why didn't he just take with the bishop and allow this. Now we can see that, now of course after this bishop comes here, for example, let's say here, lining up, that with the pawn here on h7, Anand doesn't have that option. So we can see he was thinking deeply into the position. He doesn't have that option here. So the only other option really is here. But then, you had this diagonal. Even though this knight is here, eventually you could get moves like maybe like bishop d1. And again, here is still meant by this. But just the idea of eventually maybe getting a bishop here somehow, right? And we can see that it's a little shady with these two bishops here, right? So we can see Anand's idea is to get rid of this guy, right? That way he has a place to put his king, and he can push the pawns down the board. So now let's look what actually happened, right? Position's closed, king's still safe, but now he has this square to go to, right? Notice the difference. King is perfectly safe there, and he advances the pawn. So even though these pawns are double, they're very powerful, and there's nothing black can do about it. Excuse me, nothing white can do about it. So now this bishop comes down, excuse me, rook comes down. I'll get my pieces mixed up here. And with this idea of rook h5 and just penetrating the position here. So it's amazing. I mean, Caruana has absolutely no play in the position. And just for information purposes, he had Anand had 22 minutes here, and Caruana had 1 minute and 1 second. So you could just tell he went into something that he wasn't really ready for. Basically, he went into the jungle with the tiger from Madras. He shouldn't have did that. This is Anand's type of position. Okay, knight a4, right? Looking for some counterplay here. Queen f8. Okay, there it is again. Knight b6, and Anand just grabs the pawn, snatches the pawn. He could have, of course, just played this. Okay, he snatches the pawn. Excuse me. Knight takes d5. C takes d5, and now this open c file gives, you know, white a little glimmer of hope here. So he plays queen c1, and of course, Anand is telling Caruana that you aren't going anywhere because I'm going to snatch this bishop if you do. He checks. The idea is to give up this bishop and he'll take the knight. But guess what? The rook f7, queen takes d6 and check. Caruana's in deep trouble. I mean, black has a light square bishop, and look at all the weaknesses around the light squares. Excuse me. Meanwhile, the black king is well protected. This rook is out of the picture. The rook can't go there because this pawn is covering that square. This rook is totally out of it. So, and this rook here on f7 is more than adequate, you know, for purposes of defending the king. So bishop e2 with the obvious idea, again, evading the light squares. And after that, Caruana resigned. Alright, so that was a great game by Anand. And he definitely showed a lot of heart there, repeating the same exact opening from round 6. Right? Caruana tried to go at him, you know, and you know, Anand was like, listen, I looked at the game, I improved, and you know, I hope you're ready. And Caruana was not able to deal with the you know, the problems that arose in the position. So again, I hope you enjoyed that analysis and learned something. I appreciate all comments and questions, and I'll see you guys on the next round.